I'm Tim, guitar player, teacher. In the last couple of videos, we began looking at triads and examined their inversions. These triads are the basic chords that end up being the building blocks of most other chords. In this video, we're going to look at a slightly more complicated group of chords called seventh chords. When building triads, we stacked 2/3 starting at the tonic of a major scale. This results with the first, the third, and the fifth of the scale being used in each of our triads. If we were to add another third starting from the fifth, we would end up using the seventh of the scale. Chords built this way are called seventh chords. Seventh chords are rather common in modern music, although not nearly as much as triads. They are much more prevalent in various forms of jazz and blues, but still used often enough in rock, R&B, and more popular genres. Because they have an additional chord tone, they do tend to have more tension, but it's this tension that makes them a great deal more effective, and I would say interesting, in how that tension is developed and resolved. When building the 4 triads, we looked at every possible combination of major and minor thirds that could be grouped together. To build our seventh chords, we're going to do the exact same thing by simply taking our triads and adding both a major and a minor third to each one. Remember, a major third is 2 whole steps, or 4 half steps, and a minor third is 1.5 whole steps, or 3 half steps. We'll start with our major triad. Once again, we will be using C as our key center for these examples. Adding a major third to the top of a major triad gets us to the major seventh of our scale. This results in what is called a major seventh chord. Its formula is 1, 3, 5, 7. It is often labeled with the word or abbreviation for major followed by the number 7. It is important to point out, though, that unlike a major triad, an indication of major must be included. It can be the entire word, an abbreviation, or a capital M, but it must indicate the value of major. Another common symbol for this type of chord is a triangle. It's actually the letter delta from the Greek alphabet, but whatever, it looks like a triangle, followed by the number 7. So a C major 7 would be spelled C, E, G, B. As I said earlier, these chords all have more tension, or coloring, if you will, than the triads. The addition of a major seventh to any chord tends to add quite a bit of tension because the tonic, or octave, and the leading tone are only a half step apart in the scale. Avoiding putting them right next to each other helps, but they still sound very conflicted in the same chord. When we add a minor third to the top of a major triad, it gets us to the minor seventh of the scale. This is called a dominant 7 chord. Its formula is 1, 3, 5, flat 7, and is labeled by simply adding the number 7 after the chord's root. This is why the major 7 chord has to have an indication of the value major. Without it, the chord is a dominant 7. A C dominant 7 chord would be spelled C, E, G, B flat. Again, notice the added tension. It is quite a bit more pronounced than the major 7, but doesn't sound as though something is wrong as much as it just wants to move. Dominant 7 chords are very important in harmony, as you will see later, because they have a rather unique tension built into them. They are very commonly the only types of chords used in many styles of blues, jazz, and fusion, where the goal is to maintain a sense of ambiguity within the harmony of the song and avoid any strong sense of resolution. Moving on to our minor triad. Adding a major third gets us, once again, to the major seventh of the scale. This is called a minor major 7 chord. Its name is quite obvious. It is a minor triad with a major 7th. Its formula is 1, flat 3, 5, 7. It is labeled with any of the ways a minor triad can be notated, followed by any of the ways that a major 7 can be notated. A C minor major 7 would be spelled C, E flat, G, B. This chord creates a very conflicted harmony. I think ugly is a really good word for this chord. It almost sounds like it's being played incorrectly. Again, this is a product of the relationship between the tonic and the leading tone. Adding a minor third to the top of a minor triad gets us to the minor 7th of the scale. This is called a minor 7 chord. Its formula is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. Notice here that without the specific indication that we are using a major 7th, the 7th note of the scale is lowered. In fact, as a general rule, anytime the number 7 is added to a chord value, it will be a flat 7 unless it specifically indicates that it is a major 7. There is an exception to this, but only one, and we'll get to that here in a minute. A C minor 7 is spelled C, E flat, G, B flat. I think this is actually one of the more tame 7th chords. It has additional tension, but it doesn't come across as conflicted as much as just more colorful. I've always thought they sound more calming than anything else. Okay, looking at our augmented triad. Adding a major third to an augmented triad actually gets us back to the root of the chord. Looking back at the structure of an augmented triad, it is made up of 2 major thirds. The fact that the additional major third lands on the root means that this is a symmetric shape. If you recall from the symmetric scales lesson, I mentioned that some of the results of building symmetry within a major scale would result in chord shapes. An augmented triad is one such shape. Its formula is 1, 3, sharp 5. A C augmented triad is spelled C, E, G sharp. As I noted in the last video, augmented triads have a lot of tension and are commonly used to build an anxious feeling about what may come next. If we add a minor third to the top of an augmented triad, we land on the major 7th of the scale. This is called either an augmented major 7 or a major 7 sharp 5. Its formula is 1, 3, sharp 5, 7. It is labeled, not too surprisingly, with any combination of the augmented and major 7 symbols. As should be expected with any augmented chord, especially one in which we just added a major 7, this chord has a lot of tension desperately trying to be resolved. A C augmented major 7 chord is spelled C, E, G sharp, B. Like I said, this is a very dissonant chord. It has a few typical uses, but because of its shocking amount of tension, it is not seen often in modern music. And finally, we have the diminished triad. When a major third is added to a diminished triad, it lands on the minor 7th of the scale. This is called a half diminished chord, or, more obviously, a minor 7 flat 5. Its formula is 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. It is often labeled with any symbol for a minor 7th chord with flat 5 added. Also, it can be labeled with a circle with a line through it. This indicates a diminished chord cut in half, or half diminished. Sometimes a 7 is added after the split circle, but it is not necessary. A C half diminished chord is spelled C, E flat, G flat, B flat. It's easy to hear this chord pulling you forward. Its tension is not nearly as shocking as the augmented chords, but it is still gently trying to lead us somewhere. This is actually a fairly commonly used chord in minor harmony. It does have a significant amount of tension, but not nearly as much as the augmented chords. When a minor third is added to the top of a diminished triad, it lands on the sixth of the scale. However, the chord tones of seventh chords need to be referred to as the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7. So this note is not labeled as the major sixth, but as the diminished seventh. If you remember during our interval lesson, we discussed the idea that lowering a minor interval by a half step makes it a diminished interval. This is the case in which that happens most often. This chord is called a fully or whole diminished chord or a diminished seventh. Its formula is 1, flat 3, flat 5, double flat 7. It is labeled with a circle followed by the number 7. Looking at the structure of this chord, we can see that it is built using only minor thirds. Also, the interval between the diminished seventh and the root is a minor third as well. So this chord ends up being the result of a symmetric shape built using only minor thirds. This is one of the other chord shapes that I intentionally skipped over during the symmetric scale lesson. Fully diminished chords are one of the most useful harmonic tools for creating tension. It is used quite often and can be found in all types of music. A C fully diminished chord is spelled C, E flat, G flat, B double flat. Again, this note needs to be spelled as a B double flat, not an A. And once again, it is very easy to hear how this chord is pulling the listener forward. It has more tension than the half diminished, but it creates the same basic need for resolution moving upward. So these are the seventh chords that are built by adding another third on top of our triads. There are other chords that are spelled using the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7, but they are built using other intervals, so I'm not going to touch on them here. We'll get back to them when we start to look at chord alterations and extensions. For now, though, we have a great many more chords to add to our harmonic vocabulary. As always, check the description for a link to files you can download to help keep up with this and all the other videos in this series. After introducing triads, we took a look at the inversions for each of them and the ways that those inversions can be labeled. In the next video, we're going to be doing the same thing for these seventh chords. Until then, thanks for watching. If you think I've earned it, click the like button and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see the rest of this series, and I'll see you next time. Take care.